Welcome to the Soulful of It podcast, where the cosmos meet the cards and the mundane becomes magical. I'm your guide, 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀, and in this episode we'll explore the astrological transits and tarot for the first half of February 2026, with a part 2 episode coming mid-month. Now let's fill up your cup until you're soul full of it. Hello, soulful seekers, and congratulations on navigating through what I feel like every year just is a year. It's a year trapped inside of a month called January. And if the last few weeks are any indication of where the rest of this year is headed, then I think it's fair to say that the 2026 season of the human experience is shaping up to bring more fireworks than a widow wearing sequins can set off, and more ice than can be found in all of Greenland. And I know I don't need to recap the horrors of the most recent headlines, but in case there has ever been any confusion, this podcast stands for people over profit, always, and forever against all systems of oppression, including but not limited to fascism, racism, sexism, classism, and just bigotry in all of its forms. And while I do believe that grieving looks different from person to person, I also struggle to understand which stage of grief involves pyrotechnics or merch sales. But maybe that's just me. And if none of that happens to make sense to you, then that's probably for the best. And I really want to know what rock you have been hiding under and if there is any extra room for me. If you're not tuning into the collective programming, then I really do think that you are listening to the right podcast. Because while I enjoy a good pop culture or political update, my aim is to help elevate collective consciousness, which is a whole lot easier to do when your nervous system isn't being overwhelmed with tragedy and war repackaged as division, religion, or entertainment. So let's get metaphysical about it for a moment before we tap the tarot and talk transits. I want to bring you into a conversation that I have been striking up with others recently that has been inspired by my own hypothetical questions regarding the simulation theory. If you're not sure what that is, the Google AI overview that I came across gives a pretty good description. It says, simulation theory proposes that our reality is a sophisticated computer simulation akin to a video game run by a more advanced civilization. So essentially, it's the idea that life is a game. And us humans, well, we are the players, or the characters, inside of the game. Now, I'm not saying that that is true, and I'm also not saying that it's not true. And I'm not saying that I believe it, and I'm also not saying that I don't believe it. I am a Gemini rising after all, so you will find me sitting up on my fence from time to time, hitting ideas and beliefs back and forth like ping pong balls, as I straddle the discomfort of improving my own neuroplasticity despite a world that demonizes the desire to observe before we react or decide. But regardless of my or your stance on the likelihood that the simulation theory is real, let's just play around with it for a little bit. And let's say that for the sake of this hypothetical that I'm going to pose, that we are living inside of a simulation. So here is the hypothetical conversation starter. If all of this is a simulation, why not enjoy it? If your answer to that is a folded arm grumble about how people are being shot dead in the streets, I get it. I am not arguing with your perception of reality, but I am inviting you to consider the question and to also pose your own questions based on the premise of the possibility that it's all part of a simulation. What kind of player do you want to be? And what story do you want your life to tell? What does winning your game of life look like? And what does it require of you? What does a happy ending actually look like? And how can we begin to reverse engineer it for ourselves? These are the questions that I had jotted down when I have been just simmering on this topic, which essentially is the law of attraction, right? It's manifestation. And I think what largely goes wrong for so many people in the manifestation equation is that they know what they don't want, and the clarity of that keeps serving it up to them. Whereas if you get clear about what it is that you do want, which requires imagination, leaning into possibility, and also positive thinking, that's when the manifestation magic really starts to take off. As usual, I'm not speaking from some place of enlightenment. I'm including myself in this very human pitfall, as I myself still don't have a castle to cry in. Boo-hoo, I know. But to boomerang back to the simulation theory and kind of tie this all together, here's another thought. And I love this one. It's on the concept of an NPC and how that might play out when you're thinking of the world and the human experience as a game. Now, if you don't know that acronym, the Google AI overview explains an NPC, or a non-player character, as, quote, any character in a video game or a tabletop role-playing game that's not controlled by a human player and instead managed by the game's AI or the game master to provide challenges, story, or world building. So still playing with the simulation theory here, what if the negative interactions that you've had are actually just happening with NPCs? What if those NPCs are being sent into your energetic field to test or fuck with your vibes? What if they're like phishing links, trying to agitate you into clicking them so that you wind up with some sort of malware or a virus? I mean, what do we call it when you are sick? Coronavirus, right? And on the topic of that, of malware virus, wouldn't something like low self-esteem or never feeling like you're enough, wouldn't that be a form of malware in this hypothetical? Wouldn't mental illness be a form of malware if this is a simulation? And I know with so much going on in the world, it almost feels wrong to try to cultivate good energy and create joyful moments for yourself. And that's on purpose. I think it's part of the design of the game. Our society has been programmed to hand out scripts to repeat at each other to get us so angry and upset about the worst of the world that we more easily turn on each other, and we begin to utilize shame and guilt in an attempt to force each other to open your eyes and like see all of the evil. And I'm not saying this world doesn't have evil. If there are angels, there are surely demons. And I mean, we've seen some of them recently, right? Like in the news, it's yin and yang, which is a concept. And we see that repeated throughout all cultures and practices, including astrology. I'm here using this podcast as a medium to be an outlet, of course, for my own interests in astrology and tarot and share those things, but also to ask the matrix breaking questions. Like, what if the bandwagon that is trying to bring your wavelength down into the frequency of fear is just a program? Is that how your character excels in the game of life? Or is that how you just get another game over? I mean, really thinking about the devastating feeling, like your life is over. It's so dramatic, I know, right? But we've all felt it. And yet your character must carry on living. Is that not just another game over from the game of life? Are we all not just respawning back at the beginning of the lesson that we haven't learned yet? Maybe the Groundhog Day movie is actually about the simulation theory. I don't know. But whether or not you believe in it, I think that using the hypothesis of it like a compass for where it is that you want your character story to go in your life can be really motivating. For example, I hate running. But when I'm at the gym and I'm running on the treadmill and just starting to feel like I am ready to give up because it sucks, I will tell myself that the version of me that is running the game isn't necessarily running right now. That it's just my human avatar, my player, that is doing the running, almost like taking myself out of it. It's like a different way of thinking about setting goals and making plans. And if you're feeling aimless, try to put yourself in the role of the player and then also into the role of the programmer and see how that might shift your perspective in a way that actually impacts the choices that you make, the actions that you take. It's all connected, right? We give away so much of our energy in this attention economy that we're currently in. If we can teach ourselves how to reroute that energy back into ourselves, how could that do anything but benefit us? But I'm not your programmer, and I'm also not playing your game. So I'm not here to hand you scripts or to shame you into feelings or actions. I'm here simply to ask the questions that guide you to your own answers. I'm holding a mirror, but I'm also standing in front of a big-ass window. A reminder that you can look within and without at the same time. And when the weeds of the external world start to take over your internal garden, you are the only gardener who can pull them out by their roots. So let's get our hands dirty together and let's tend to our free thinking gardens by exploring the curiosities that the cards evoke before looking into the cosmos. And who knows, maybe we'll come across a cheat code. Tapping the Soulful of Wisdom tarot spread, beginning with the wisdom or the rose at the center of our spread, the 9 of Cups. In the traditional Smith-Rider-Waite tarot deck imagery, we see a person in a white robe with a red hat. And maybe the white robe is like more of a dress. I'm not really sure. But they are seated comfortably. They have their arms crossed in front of them, and they've got this nice smile on their face. Behind them, 9 golden cups are neatly arranged. They're up on this tall surface, and they look like trophies out on display. The person appears to be satisfied, relaxed, and grounded in the present moment rather than reaching for whatever comes next. Sometimes referred to as the wish card, the 9 of Cups speaks to emotional fulfillment, but not the kind that arrives through hustling, comparing, or seeking external validation. This card represents the satisfaction that comes from being content right now with what already is. As our rose, this card signals that the month of February wants us to remember that joy is not something we can only access or earn after suffering enough for it. It's something that we can allow ourselves to experience at any time, which includes the moments we take a pause to recognize all we've already accomplished. In the context of everything that we've already been talking about, the simulation theory, programming your own experience, choosing what kind of player that you want to be, the 9 of Cups brings us back to the powerful yet simple question: what if you let yourself enjoy the game? What if you let yourself enjoy your life right now, as it is? It isn't about bypassing grief or pretending that the world isn't on fire. It's about remembering that soul fulfillment, like joy, is an inside job, and that pleasure, gratitude, and feelings of satisfaction are powerful forms of resistance in a system that is designed to keep us perpetually dissatisfied, constantly consuming the most recently marketed antidote, and participating in a cycle of unwellness that serves only to keep lining the pockets of those who profit from controlling the 99% through illness of mind, body, and spirit. The Nine of Cups says you do not have to perform rituals of self-abandonment in order to be worthy of feeling joyful or proud of yourself. Joy belongs to you, and you don't need a shooting star to make your wishes come true. Now let's turn our attention to the card we pulled for our Thorns. The King of Swords, who sits atop a stone throne adorned with butterflies and crescent moons, symbols of change and cycles of transformation. He holds his sword upright in his right hand, pointing it toward the sky, while his left hand rests calmly on the arm of the throne. His gaze is direct, alert, and offers an unwavering confidence. The sky behind him is blue as two birds fly by, symbolizing his ability to maintain a bird's eye perspective. As our Thorns, the King of Swords brings our attention to how our thoughts impact, influence, or even narrate our reality. This card represents logic, authority, and mastery of the mind in order to adequately filter both the thoughts that we think as well as the words that we speak. Showing up in the Thorns position, it asks us to notice, how are we utilizing our active minds? Are we ruminating to truly solve a problem? Or have we fallen into a familiar trap of self-blame, overthinking, or overanalyzing? Are we fact-checking our judgments before they depart our lips? Or have we removed the barriers of discernment, self-respect, and discipline that require us to think before we speak? In a world flooded with information, a 24/7 news cycle, and algorithms that feed off of outrage and reactionary content, the King of Swords asks, who is writing your internal scripts? Is it the cheerleader, or is it the bully? Remember that what you feed is what's going to grow stronger. This card doesn't demonize logic. It asks us to wield it responsibly, to remember that intelligence without compassion can quickly devolve into cruelty. With Mercury moving into Pisces ahead of its coming retrograde, and Saturn preparing to enter Aries, the way we think matters a lot right now because it shapes the ways that we act. Speaking of fire and agency, let's look to the root of this spread, where we find the Queen of Wands. She is seated on a throne decorated with lions and sunflowers, symbols of vitality, courage, and creative fire. She holds a wand upright in one hand and a sunflower in the other. A black cat sits at her feet, representing mystery and independence. At the root of this spread, the Queen of Wands, often referred to as the Witch of the Tarot, reveals that beneath the noise, the fear, the acuity, there is a version of you that already knows exactly who they are. The bedrock of the first half of February is about embracing that innate sovereignty and authenticity. The Queen of Wands doesn't ask permission to take up space or for a seat at the table. Hell, she's on a throne. She doesn't even need a table. She doesn't wait for a consensus to take action. She trusts her intuition, and ultimately she trusts herself to guide her own movements forward. She leads from embodied confidence, not arrogance or dominance. The Queen of Wands reminds us that we get to decide whether we as players utilize our energy and our magic to break or perpetuate the cycles and patterns of this game. And finally, we arrive at our sun, the Tower, In the Smith Rider-Waite imagery, we see lightning strike a tall stone structure as flames erupt from its windows and two people fall from its heights. A crown is knocked from the top, symbolizing the collapse of false authority, illusions, and structures that have been built on unstable foundations. As our guidance, the Tower doesn't arrive to punish, it arrives to liberate. This card represents sudden and often shocking change, as well as the dismantling of systems that can no longer be sustained and the consequences of abuses of power. Now, I know that when the Tower appears in a reading for me, I can get a little bit triggered, and sometimes it just upsets me, to be honest. I'm like, you again? Can we not? But in this reading, I think this is a very welcomed energy, because the Tower reminds us that what goes up must come down, and it invites us to sit back and to watch the dumpster fire engulf itself. Sometimes the cheat code isn't fixing the structure, it's letting it fall. The Tower says, what's collapsing now was never meant to last. And what survives the fall, that's what is real. The crown coming from the top, that is big no king's energy. And the medicine of the Tower, it can be uncomfortable, but it is always necessary. Especially as Saturn enters Aries and joins Neptune, and illusions of power and authority, they can't hide from the light anymore. This spread invites us to play the game differently, not from fear or familiar programming, but from conscious choice and sovereign self-direction. And as we turn our gaze to the cosmos, we'll see that February's transits also echo this invitation, beginning with the full moon in Leo at 2:08 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday the 1st. This full moon is the last of 4 in a row that have all taken place at 13 degrees, which is a pattern that I've been paying attention to because patterns reveal perceptions. And when the moon is full, we tend to see things that reach a peak. So what patterns or points of view are you ready to release that you've been in the process of shedding since 4 months ago, October, when we had the first of the 4 13 degrees full moons? This is also our last lunation before eclipse season comes, so there is extra value in reflecting on what it is that could be weighing you down that you're ready to set aside in order to feel lighter and more free to embrace expansion when you walk through the eclipse portal in 2 weeks' time. Looking at the aspects, we have a noteworthy stellium in Aquarius. Pluto, Mars, the Sun, of course, because it's Aquarius season, Venus, and Mercury are all in the sign of the humanitarian. The full moon in Leo is also ruled by the Sun, giving even more significance to all the planets opposing it. With Venus and Mars on either side of the Sun, we may encounter some tension around expressing or fulfilling our emotional needs in our close relationships, and Mercury's opposition can tempt us to think our way out of it, perhaps even avoiding acknowledging how we're feeling about things altogether. But the moon shining full in the sign of the Lion, it can't be tamed. And when the lion has something to say, you're going to have to hear it roar. So if you're feeling something strong, you need to give that an outlet on this full moon, or it could kind of explode on you. Because fiery moons, they are, well, fiery. To work with this Leo full moon, you want to lean into your creativity however you can. Do something that brings you childlike joy. Maybe you want to make some art or music. It could just be some car karaoke. Whatever it is that feels right for you to bring that self-expression out, that is going to be the thing that can help signal the shift of the full moon energy for you to just really, truly embrace it. And also because Leo is a fire sign, it is perfect for writing down anything that you want to let go of and burning it. which is something I have not done in quite a while. In fact, way too long. So maybe that's what I need to do for myself in order to prepare my own energetic field for the downloads that eclipse season is going to bring us. Just a couple weeks away. Next, we can expect the unexpected as Uranus stations direct on the 3rd at 27 degrees Taurus. Uranus has been retrograde since early September, and during these last 5 months of its annual retrograde, it's not like we stopped seeing change unfold or shocking turns of events. In fact, we had quite the turning point less than a week after the retrograde began, didn't we? Retrogrades, especially for outer planets, are more like deep ocean streams than they are waves you can see coming from the shore. They have undercurrents, and the impact of the retrograde isn't typically as obvious or noticeable as it is with the personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. But this was our last retrograde of Uranus in the sign of Taurus, so I do think there's an extra dash of importance with this one. And I also feel we saw that playing out. There have been a lot of changes unfolding on the world stage, and many of them do not seem to make much or any sense on the surface. And yet there are backdoor deals being cut and happenings behind the scenes that are influencing what we see out on the stage before us. Now that Uranus has stationed direct, we may start seeing more of the why behind recent and upcoming changes being seen more easily by the greater audience taking it all in. Like, where are those Epstein files? Can we get the rest of them and not the fully redacted pages? Okay, thanks, please. This Uranus retrograde, it began in the sign of Gemini, if you recall, and then Uranus moved back into Taurus for its final journey through the fixed Earth sign. That was in early November. So there has been a blended energy of how we've begun shifting the conversations that we're having around all of these collective changes, as well as how we're alchemizing the evolution of our resources, our values, and our pleasures, which are all very Tauresian energies, right? That have come from these last 7 years of the transit of Uranus through Taurus. I see this coming Earth to air shift of Uranus as a building upon the clarity that we've gained around what really matters, aka our values, so that we can rise into the higher frequency of mind over matter, aka thoughts becoming things. So while I don't think you'll necessarily have a sudden moment of profound insight on the precise day that we see Uranus stationed direct, I do think that over the next several weeks, especially with eclipses coming, we will have more aha moments that have Tauresian roots. If you want to lean into this energy more while we still have it, keeping in mind that none of us will live long enough to see Uranus enter Taurus again in this lifetime, here are a couple of ideas of things that you can do. The first one is to invest. That could be money. Maybe it's just $1 extra a week into an IRA, or it could be your time. Maybe you sign up to volunteer for a cause that aligns with your personal values. Second, experience your own senses through contrast. That could be running a bath, but only soaking your feet, smelling a couple different candles or essential oils, or meditating without any sound, and then with some sort of guided meditation or white noise, nature sounds, or something like that playing. Try out any of these ideas over the coming weeks and just see how welcoming change allows the changes that are already underway to find you with more gentleness, ease, and intentionality. Then on Friday the 6th, Mercury enters Pisces, where words get lost like people are speaking through abstract art. When I think of people with their natal Mercury in Pisces, they are so imaginative, so creative. They speak a unique language that can't always be decoded through words alone. Due to the elusive nature of this transit, there is a need to pay closer attention and to look beyond what is said and into what is felt. Mercury rules Virgo, the opposite sign of Pisces, which means that Mercury in the sign of the fish is in what's known as its fall in astrological dignity. Translation, there's some fog in the communication, there's some extra explaining that you might have to do at times. Have you ever played the game 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗀? If you haven't, it's a game where you keep putting marshmallows into your mouth and saying 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀 until you cannot be understood anymore. And the idea is to see who can get the most marshmallows in their mouth. Mercury in Pisces as a transit is like starting out the day with a couple of marshmallows already in your mouth and also in the mouths of everyone else around you. But you're trying to get your work done and you're trying to communicate beyond repeating 𝗧𝗶𝗺𝗀𝗀 to each other. So it's a little bit more complicated. We get to have a little extra time with this transit because the upcoming Mercury retrograde is going to be in the sign of Pisces. So rather than resist it and try to swallow down the marshmallows of my metaphor too quickly, why not look for the dreamy Piscean gifts that can come from developing more empathy and understanding for yourself and others when you're listening with more than just your ears. Then coming in hot right after, on Tuesday the 10th, Venus follows Mercury and enters Pisces, which is where Venus is exalted, which is astrological lingo for functioning at a higher capacity. Venus loves love, and Pisces is a lover at heart. Venus also loves art, and Pisces is an artist of many mediums. So this addition of Venusian energy overlapping with the Mercury retrograde that's coming later this month helps soften and sweeten things up. Venus says, I have no fucking idea what you're trying to say with all of those marshmallows in your mouth, but I am really enjoying watching you talk, and it's reminding me that even when I don't understand you, I still love you. And that's energy that we can give to others for free, as well as to ourselves. It's a great transit for writing out your feelings in dreamy, lovey, romantic ways. Maybe you want to make a little Valentine for somebody or for yourself. 'Tis the season. But it's also short-lived. It's a 3-week period of connecting through creativity and art. If you want to do Venus and Pisces things, you can try doing a paint night somewhere, checking out an art exhibit, or going to enjoy some sort of live theater or even comedy somewhere in your community. Then a quick note that I want to make before we chat about our last transit of this episode, which is that on Thursday the 12th, Mercury enters the pre-retrograde shadow period. This is your 2 weeks heads up that the retrograde is coming and it's time to start paying closer attention. Any mercurial things like sending text messages or emails, any lessons that you might be learning that seem to be taking center stage that have to do with communicating or sending or receiving information in general could boomerang back during the retrograde period. So just a quick heads up, don't fear the retrograde, just know that it's coming and challenge yourself if you can to pay closer attention. And knowing that Mercury is in Pisces, try to listen to what's being said when nothing is actually being said. Finally, we shift from talking of water signs back to talking about fire signs. As on Friday the 13th, Saturn enters Aries. And what a fitting date that is. This means that for those who are born between May 1993 and April 1996, as well as March 1964 and March 1967, your Saturn return has officially come to an end. And now the gifts of Saturn are on their way to you if they haven't already started showing up. Now, whether you have Saturn in Pisces in your natal chart or not, this is a powerful time to reflect back to March 2023 and ask yourself, how have you grown? What lessons have you learned that were particularly challenging, but also quite rewarding? What muscles have you built? And maybe they're literal muscles, you gym rat, or maybe it's the memory muscle that you have strengthened. You'll want to look at where you have Pisces in your chart, of course. So for Aries rising, that's your 12th house of endings and subconscious. For Taurus rising, that's your 11th house of goals and community. For Gemini rising, that's your 10th house of public image and career. You just keep going back from there. Cancer, 9th house, Leo, 8th house, and so on. And I'd say for those who have just graduated from the Saturn return period, that it is an especially powerful time for you to be reflecting as a form of integrating one of the most significant periods of your life. As for those of you with your natal Saturn in Aries who were born between March 1996 and March 1999, or April 1967 and April 1969, now it's your turn to return to Saturn. Say that 3 times fast. Saturn spends 2 to 3 years in each sign, and it's going to be in Aries until April 12th, 2028. So we have time to work with this energy. Saturn is about mastery, and Aries is about the self. So naturally, it's about self-mastery. Just as with Saturn in Pisces, it's helpful to look at your natal chart and see where it is that you have Aries to get a sense of what arena of your life is being given the Saturnian workout. I've said this before on this podcast, but it never fails to be my favorite explanation of Saturn, so I'll repeat it. Saturn is like the personal trainer that you didn't hire who shows up at your house at 5 a.m. and makes you run a mile, and you kind of hate them for it while you're running that mile, but afterwards, when the endorphins flood in and you're watching the sunrise and feeling proud of yourself, you feel grateful. You know that you've grown stronger, and you've also shown yourself just what you're capable of in the process. Aries is the warrior of the zodiac, and with Neptune also there, which we will be talking about more in the February Part 2 episode, we're going to have more of an intense go with this energy on a collective level that is probably going to spill into the personal a little bit as well. One way I can see this playing out is with continued protests and civil unrest. I'm not saying violence is inevitable, but I do believe we will see more of it over the next 2 years, and our part in that individually requires that we self-regulate. We must learn when to walk away so we don't cause harm to ourselves or others, and we also must learn when we actually do need to fight. Is there a time when violence is the answer? I don't know, but I think we might find out over the next 2 years. And as always, I don't share that to feed fear. I share it simply to bring awareness. If we have the heads up that we're entering a fiery chapter on a collective level, which is Aries energy, where tough lessons are being learned, which is Saturnian, and things are likely to be unclear or a bit confusing in general, which is Neptunian, then we have the insights that can help us better prepare for it. As a fire sign myself, I do have a shorter fuse than some, okay, maybe all of my non-fire sign friends. And that's something that I've just always known about myself. With great passion comes great power, right? But with great power comes great responsibility. Saturn's transits are meant to help us build better discipline. A gentle reminder that if you punch someone in the face, not only will they lose all of those marshmallows that we were talking about earlier, but you might also break your own hand in the process. Hurting you hurts me. It's that vibe. And with that silly metaphor, we have reached the closing of this episode, where we return to the wisdom of our tarot guides. The 9 of Cups invites us to claim satisfaction without searching first for a ticket to ride. The King of Swords reminds us that we can be both critical and conscious thinkers. The Queen of Wands calls us back into the confident embodiment of our unique magic. And the Tower signals that even a $400 million ballroom will crumble like a sandcastle when faced with a tsunami of transformation. This isn't about escaping the game. It's about becoming your authentic self, a player whose awakening reshapes the rules, rewrites the code, and redistributes the power. If you're curious to learn how the transits of this month and beyond are unfolding in your own natal chart, you can check the show notes for the link to book a reading with me. And just remember that if you use code MAGICIAN when booking a live virtual reading, that reading will drop to $99. That is a promo I'm just running until we welcome the Year of the Fire Horse, which will be mid-February on the 17th to be exact. Coming up in the part 2 episode, we'll talk about the new cycle starting with the Aquarius solar eclipse, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, and our first Mercury retrograde of 2026 in Pisces. Also, for another quick check-in so that you don't think I've forgotten, the Astrology of 2026 episode is still underway. It just happens to be a year filled with important transits, and the outline has a lot of meat on the bone. So I've been trying to savor putting it together so that it can be as cohesive and insightful as possible. Thank you for your patience and grace, and just know that the episode will be dropping on a surprise date pretty soon. I'm sending gratitude your way. It's always a joy exploring the cards and cosmos together. Stay grounded, stay curious, stay soulful of it, and I'll catch up with you mid-month.